Three siblings stood in a lawyer's office, signing documents their father couldn't read, taking money from a man who could barely remember his own name. They told themselves it was fine, that dementia had already stolen him away, that he would never know the difference. But at 3 a.m, in a dark living room lit only by a single lamp, one of them discovered something that would shatter everything they believed. Their father clutching a piece of paper like his life depended on it, whispering words that should have been impossible for a man with no memory. And when that paper vanished into the hands of someone watching from the shadows, the siblings realized they hadn't just stolen money. They had triggered something their parents had planned years ago, a devastating revelation that would force them to confront not just their own greed, but a family secret so painful it had been literally buried in the ground, waiting for this exact moment to claw its way back to the surface. What their father remembered would destroy them. What their mother left behind would change them forever. And the inheritance they fought so hard to steal would demand a price none of them were prepared to pay. If you want to discover how this story unfolds and what truth was buried beneath that old oak tree, make sure to follow the channel, leave a like, and comment below telling us where you're watching from. This is a story about love, guilt, and the devastating cost of family secrets that you won't be able to stop thinking about. The rain hammers down on Silver Pines, Oregon, like God himself is trying to drown the town's secrets. It's the kind of storm that makes you want to stay inside, wrapped in blankets, pretending the world outside doesn't exist. But Elliot Hargrove doesn't have that luxury tonight. Not when guilt gnaws at his insides like a hungry rat, reminding him with every breath that what he and his siblings did, what they are doing, is unforgivable. It's 2:47 a.m. when he pulls up to his father's house, the old Victorian structure looming in the darkness like a skeleton wrapped in peeling paint. The porch light flickers, casting erratic shadows that dance across the wet pavement. Elliot sits in his truck for a moment, engine still running, windshield wipers beating a frantic rhythm. In his trembling hands, he holds an envelope, 1/3 of their father's fortune, divided prematurely among 3 siblings who convinced themselves that a man with dementia wouldn't remember, wouldn't care, wouldn't know. He won't remember anyway, Marjorie had said 3 weeks ago, her voice cold and practical as she always was when it came to money. Dad's gone, Caleb had agreed, running his fingers through his thinning hair. The man we knew, he's already dead. We're just managing the aftermath. Elliot had nodded then, had even helped draft the documents, had smiled as they signed papers in a lawyer's office that wasn't Henry Collins's, because Henry would have asked too many questions. But now, sitting in the darkness with rain drumming against metal, Elliot feels something he hasn't felt in months. Shame so thick it coats his throat like tar. He kills the engine and steps out into the downpour. The cold water soaks through his jacket instantly, mixing with the sweat of anxiety on his skin. Each step toward the house feels heavier than the last, like he's walking through wet concrete. The wooden steps of the porch groan under his weight, a sound he remembers from childhood, from when this house was full of laughter instead of ghosts. The front door is unlocked. Of course it is. His father forgets to lock it most nights now, forgets where he is, forgets his own children's names. But as Elliot pushes the door open, his heart stops cold in his chest. The living room light is on, blazing bright at 3 a.m, and his father is awake. Walter Hargrove sits hunched on the old leather sofa, the one that's been in the family since Elliot was 7 years old. The TV is off. The house is silent except for the rain battering the windows and the slow, methodical drip of water leaking somewhere in the walls. A leak Walter would have fixed immediately in his prime, but now doesn't even notice. The smell hits Elliot next, stale coffee, unwashed clothes, the faint acidic scent of someone who stopped caring about basic hygiene. It's the smell of decline, of a man disappearing piece by piece. But it's what Walter is holding that makes Elliot's blood run cold. A piece of paper, crumpled and worn, clutched against his father's chest like it's the last lifeline on a sinking ship. Walter's hands, those hands that once built fences, chopped wood, held Elliot steady when he learned to ride a bike, now shake violently, knuckles white from gripping so hard. "Dad!" Elliot's voice comes out as a whisper, strangled by the knot in his throat. Walter's head lifts slowly, painfully, like it weighs 1,000 pounds. And when their eyes meet, Elliot sees something that nearly breaks him. His father doesn't recognize him. Those blue eyes, once sharp and commanding, are now clouded, lost, swimming in a confusion so profound it looks like drowning. They're going to want back what I took from them," Walter mumbles, his voice a broken rasp that sounds like sandpaper on raw wood. "But I wrote it all down. It's all here. Everything. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. The irony is a knife twisting in Elliot's gut. His father writing things down so he wouldn't forget, while Elliot and his siblings had counted on exactly that forgetting to justify their theft. Dad, it's me. It's Elliot. He takes a tentative step forward, hands raised like he's approaching a wounded animal. The floorboards creak. A flash of lightning illuminates the room for a split second, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Walter's eyes widen with something that looks like terror. He pulls the paper closer to his chest, his breathing accelerating into rapid, panicked gasps. Don't let them burn it. They'll burn it if they find it. They always burn the evidence. That's what they do. That's what they always do. Nobody's burning anything, Dad. I promise. Elliot moves closer, close enough to smell the coffee on his father's breath, close enough to see the tears forming in the old man's eyes, tears that carve tracks through the grime on his weathered cheeks. You promise? Walter's voice breaks, and suddenly he sounds like a child, small and frightened. You promise they won't take it? I promise. But even as Elliot says it, he knows he's lying. He knows that if that paper contains anything about the money, about the accounts, about the division of the estate, he and his siblings will do whatever it takes to make sure it disappears. Because they've already spent the money in their minds, paid off debts, planned vacations, imagined new lives. Elliot reaches out slowly, his hand trembling as much as his father's. Can I see it, Dad? Can I see what you wrote? For a moment, Walter's expression softens. A flicker of something, recognition maybe, or just a break in the confusion, passes across his face. His grip on the paper loosens slightly, and Elliot thinks maybe, just maybe, his father is still in there somewhere, still capable of trust. But then Walter's face contorts in anguish. He jerks the paper back, pressing it so hard against his chest that it crumples further. No, I can't. If I give it to you, they'll know. They'll know what I did. They'll know about... He stops abruptly, mouth hanging open, eyes darting around the room like he's seeing ghosts in every corner. Know about what, Dad? What did you do? But Walter just shakes his head violently, back and forth, like a metronome of madness. Can't tell. Promised her I wouldn't tell. Promised. Thunder cracks so loud it rattles the windows. Elliot flinches. And in that split second of distraction, Walter does something that will haunt Elliot for the rest of his life. He looks directly at his son with eyes suddenly, impossibly clear, crystal clear, like the fog has lifted for just this one moment, and whispers with perfect lucidity. I know what you did, Elliot. I know what all three of you did. The words hit like a physical blow. Elliot staggers backward, his heart hammering so hard he can hear it in his ears. Dad, I don't. You took it before I died. Before I'm even in the ground. You couldn't wait. Walter's voice is steady now, heartbreakingly steady. Your mother would be so ashamed. And just like that, the clarity vanishes. Walter's eyes fog over again, and he slumps back into the couch, muttering incomprehensibly, the paper still clutched in his desperate grip. Elliot stands frozen, paralyzed by horror and guilt. His hands shake so badly he has to shove them in his pockets. He wants to scream, to cry, to drop to his knees and beg for forgiveness. But he does none of those things. Because beneath the guilt, beneath the shame, there's something else, fear. Fear of what that paper contains. Fear of what his father knows. Fear of what will happen if the truth comes out. I'll check on you tomorrow, Dad, he manages to say, his voice barely audible over the storm. He backs toward the door, unable to take his eyes off his father, who's now rocking slowly back and forth, whispering to the paper like it's a living thing. Elliot steps out onto the porch, and the cold rain hits his face like a slap, bringing him back to his senses. He's halfway to his truck when he sees it, a silhouette across the street, standing perfectly still in the downpour. Just standing there, watching. Elliot's breath catches. The figure is too far away to make out details, but something about the posture, the absolute stillness, sends ice through his veins. He blinks, wiping rain from his eyes, and when he looks again, the figure is gone. Vanished. Like it was never there. Jesus, he mutters, fumbling for his truck keys. His hands are shaking so badly it takes 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. He's losing it. The guilt is making him paranoid, making him see things that aren't there. But as he pulls away from the curb, he makes the mistake of looking back at the house one more time. And that's when he sees it, when his world tilts sickeningly on its axis. Through the living room window, he can see his father on the couch. But his father's hands are empty now. The paper, that crumpled, precious, terrifying paper, is gone. Walter sits alone in the blazing light, hands open and empty, staring at nothing. And somewhere in that house, or outside it, or in hands Elliot can't see, that paper still exists. Waiting. The old barn smells like childhood, like hay and rust, and the ghost of horses long dead. Elliot stands in the center of the structure, flashlight in hand, watching dust motes dance in the beam like tiny spirits. It's 4:43 a.m., barely an hour since he fled his father's house, and he hasn't slept. Can't sleep. Won't sleep. Not with that image burned into his retinas. His father's empty hands, the missing paper, the figure in the rain. He called his siblings 20 minutes ago. Neither answered at first. Who would at this ungodly hour? But he kept calling, kept texting, his messages growing more desperate with each attempt. We need to talk. Now. The barn. It's about Dad. It's bad. Marjorie arrives first, her Mercedes kicking up gravel as she pulls in too fast, too reckless for someone who prides herself on control. She's still in her pajamas, expensive silk ones that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, with a coat thrown over them. Her blonde hair, usually perfectly styled, hangs limp around her face. She looks older in this light, the lines around her eyes deeper, the bitterness that she usually hides behind Botox and smile now visible in every crease. This better be worth dragging me out of bed, Elliot, she snaps, slamming her car door. But her voice wavers at the end, betraying the fear she's trying to mask with anger. It is, Elliot says quietly, and something in his tone makes her stop, makes her really look at him. Her expression shifts from irritation to concern to something darker. Dread, maybe, or recognition that the house of cards they've built is starting to collapse. Caleb shows up 10 minutes later, his pickup truck sputtering and coughing like it's on its last legs. He's the youngest of the three at 39, but looks 50, premature gray streaking his temples, a paunch hanging over his belt, the wear and tear of a man who's spent too many years doing manual labor for not enough money. He's the one who needed the inheritance most, the one who pushed hardest for them to just take what's rightfully ours before the state gets involved, as he'd put it. He climbs out of his truck with a cigarette already dangling from his lips, smoke curling up into the pre-dawn darkness. Someone better be dying, he mutters, but then he catches sight of Elliot's face, and the cigarette falls from his mouth, forgotten. Jesus, man, you look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have, Elliot whispers, and the words hang in the cold air like a confession. They gather inside the barn, three siblings bound by blood and now by guilt, standing in a loose triangle like gunfighters waiting for someone to draw first. The flashlight sits on an overturned bucket, casting long shadows up the walls, making them all look monstrous, distorted, wrong. Elliot tells them everything. Every detail. The light in the living room at 3 a.m. Walter clutching that paper like a drowning man clutching driftwood. The terror in the old man's eyes. The moment of impossible clarity when he said, "I know what you did, Elliot. I know what all three of you did." The figure in the rain. And finally, the part that makes his voice crack, that makes his hands shake so badly he has to grip the flashlight to steady them. The empty hands, the vanished paper. Marjorie's face goes through a series of transformations as he speaks. Denial first, her mouth opening to interrupt, to rationalize, to explain it all away. Then fear, genuine and raw, making her wrap her arms around herself like she's freezing despite the coat. And finally, something harder, colder, calculation. The same look she gets when she's negotiating a business deal, when she's deciding whether something is worth the risk. He doesn't know anything, she says firmly when Elliot finishes. He has dementia, for God's sake. He probably doesn't even remember saying it. You're reading too much into this. He knew my name, Marjorie. He looked right at me and knew exactly who I was and what we did. For 5 seconds. She's almost shouting now, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. For 5 seconds he might have been lucid, and then what? He forgot again. That's how it works. That's how this disease works. She's trying to convince herself as much as them, her words coming faster, more desperate. And this paper you're talking about? It's probably nothing. Probably some old receipt or a grocery list or... Then why did someone take it? Elliot's question cuts through her rambling like a knife. Why was someone watching the house at 3 in the morning? Why did that paper disappear the second I looked away? The silence that follows is suffocating. Caleb lights another cigarette with shaking hands, the flame from his lighter casting brief, hellish shadows across his face. He takes a long drag, holds it, exhales slowly. What are you saying, Elliot? That someone's what? Watching us? That Dad somehow planned this? I don't know what I'm saying. Elliot's frustration explodes out of him, making both his siblings flinch. I don't know anything anymore. All I know is that we took money that wasn't ours yet, from a man who's supposed to be too far gone to remember, and now there's a missing piece of paper that scared Dad so badly he was clutching it like his life depended on it. Marjorie's jaw tightens. She turns away, pacing the length of the barn, her expensive slippers making soft shuffling sounds in the dirt. When she speaks again, her voice is quieter but no less intense. We didn't do anything illegal. We're his children. We're his only heirs. The money would come to us anyway when he... She can't say the word dies. None of them can. When the time comes, we just expedited the process. We forged his signature on transfer documents while he was having a bad day and couldn't remember what year it was, Caleb says flatly, stubbing out his cigarette with more force than necessary. Let's not sugarcoat what we did, Marge. We're thieves. Just because we're stealing from family doesn't make it noble. Then why did you go along with it? Marjorie whirls on him, eyes flashing. Why did you cash your check? Why did you pay off your gambling debts with Dad's money if you're so morally superior? I never said I was. Caleb's shout reverberates through the barn, sending a roosting bird fleeing through a gap in the roof. I know what I am. I know I'm a piece of shit. I don't need you to remind me. Stop it. Elliot steps between them, hands raised. Just stop. This isn't helping. But the damage is done. The unspoken resentments, the buried accusations, the years of sibling rivalry and jealousy and comparison. It's all bubbling to the surface now, toxic and unstoppable. They stand there, three people who share DNA but little else, staring at each other across a chasm that feels wider than the barn itself. It's Marjorie who breaks first. She always does when the mask slips, when the Ice Queen facade cracks enough to let the frightened little girl underneath peek through. What do we do? She whispers, and for the first time since they were children, she sounds vulnerable. Elliot, what do we do? And that's when Elliot makes the decision that will damn them all, or save them, though he can't know which yet. We go back to the house. We search it, top to bottom. Every drawer, every closet, every goddamn floorboard if we have to. We find that paper, and we find out what it says before anyone else does. And if Dad stops us? Caleb asks quietly. He won't remember we were there. Marjorie answers, but her voice shakes. That's the whole point, isn't it? He won't remember. They stand there in the growing light of dawn, three siblings about to cross a line they can never uncross, about to violate their father's home and privacy in ways that make their financial theft seem almost innocent by comparison. The moral weight of it settles over them like a blanket made of lead. When? Caleb finally asks. Today, Elliot says. Before whoever took that paper does something with it. They're about to leave, to go their separate ways for a few hours of restless sleep before reconvening, when Caleb's phone buzzes. The sound is jarring in the quiet barn, making all three of them jump. Caleb pulls it from his pocket, glances at the screen, and his face goes absolutely white, the color draining so fast he actually sways on his feet. What? Marjorie demands. What is it? Wordlessly, Caleb holds out the phone. On the screen is a photograph. A close-up of a wrinkled, age-spotted hand clutching a piece of crumpled paper. The image quality is good enough to see the veins standing out on the back of the hand, the slight tremor captured mid-shake. And in the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, is a brown leather armchair, the same armchair that sits in Walter Hargrove's living room. There's no message, no name, no number, just the photo, and beneath it, the timestamp, 3:17 a.m., taken while Elliot was still in the house. Marjorie's hand flies to her mouth. Elliot feels his knees go weak. Caleb just stares at the screen like it might come alive and bite him. Someone was in the house with you, Marjorie breathes. Someone was in there, watching, taking pictures. Or someone has access to Dad's security cameras, Caleb suggests weakly, but they all know Walter doesn't have security cameras. Can barely work a television remote anymore. The implication hangs in the air, heavy and terrifying. Someone was there, invisible, watching them, documenting their sins, and now they're being sent proof that their secrets aren't secret anymore. We searched the house, Elliot says again, but his voice is hollow now, emptied of conviction. Today, together, we find out what the hell is going on. They separate as the sun begins to stain the eastern sky pink and gold, each carrying their fear like a stone in their chest, each wondering what they've really done and what price they'll pay for it. None of them notice the fresh tire tracks in the mud outside the barn, tracks from a vehicle that isn't any of theirs. They return to Walter's house at 2 p.m., when the autumn sun hangs weak and pale in the Oregon sky, offering light but no warmth. The three siblings arrive separately, Marjorie in her Mercedes, Caleb in his rattling pickup, Elliot in his sensible Honda, as if arriving together would make their conspiracy more real, more damning. They park on different sides of the street, maintaining the illusion of coincidence, though anyone watching would see right through it. The house looks different in daylight. Less menacing, perhaps, but more sad, like a once proud dowager reduced to wearing yesterday's makeup and torn stockings. The paint peels more obviously in the sun. The gutters sag with accumulated leaves and debris. A broken shutter hangs at an angle, banging softly against the siding whenever the wind picks up. This is what happens when the man who maintained everything loses his mind piece by piece. The house dies with him, slowly, room by room, board by board. Walter's old Buick sits in the driveway, covered in a film of pollen and rain spots. He hasn't driven in 8 months, not since he forgot where the grocery store was and ended up 30 miles away, crying in a Walmart parking lot until a kind stranger called the police. The keys are hidden now, buried in a drawer somewhere, though Walter still asks for them sometimes, insisting he needs to get to work, needs to pick up the kids from school, kids who are now in their 40s. Elliot reaches the door first. His hand hovers over the knob, trembling slightly. This morning, entering this house felt like visiting a sick relative. Now it feels like breaking and entering, like trespassing in a tomb. The difference is intent. The difference is knowing they're here to steal not just money, but truth. He pushes the door open, still unlocked, because Walter forgets, always forgets, and the smell hits them immediately. It's worse than last night. Stale urine, rotting food, the sharp chemical smell of cleaning products used incorrectly. Marjorie's face wrinkles in disgust, and she pulls a silk scarf from her purse, pressing it delicately against her nose like a Victorian lady confronted with common sewage. Jesus Christ, Caleb mutters, his voice muffled as he breathes through his mouth. How long has he been living like this? The question hangs unanswered because they all know the answer, and it's damning. Long enough that they should have noticed, should have helped, should have been better children. But they were too busy planning how to divide his money to notice he was drowning in his own home. They find Walter in the kitchen, standing in front of the open refrigerator, staring at its contents with the profound confusion of a man who's forgotten what food is for. He's wearing the same clothes as last night, a stained undershirt and pajama bottoms that hang loose on his diminishing frame. His feet are bare, pale and thin, toenails yellowed and overgrown. He looks like a ghost of himself, like someone drew a rough sketch of Walter Hargrove from memory and got all the proportions slightly wrong. "Dad!" Elliot's voice comes out softer than he intended, gentler, carrying a note of love he thought he'd buried under layers of resentment and greed. Walter turns slowly, his movements mechanical, puppet-like. His eyes skin over them, Elliot, then Marjorie, then Caleb, with no recognition, no spark of familiarity. To him, they're strangers who've invaded his space, and the fear that blooms across his face is heartbreaking in its purity. "Who are you?" he asks, his voice high and querulous. "What do you want?" "I don't have any money here. I don't keep money in the house." Marjorie steps forward, her business smile firmly in place, the one she uses on difficult clients. "Dad, it's us. It's Marjorie, Elliot, and Caleb. Your children." Walter's face scrunches up in concentration, like he's trying to solve a complex equation. His lips move silently, repeating the names. Marjorie, Elliot, Caleb. But the words are just sounds to him, devoid of meaning, empty of connection. "I had children once," he says finally, more to himself than to them. "But they grew up. They left. They don't visit anymore." The accusation in those last words, unintentional but devastating, hits each of them like a physical blow. Caleb actually takes a step backward, his face crumpling. Marjorie's smile falters, revealing the raw hurt underneath. Elliot feels something crack open in his chest, something that's been frozen solid for years. "We're here now, Dad," he manages to say, though his throat feels like it's closing. "We're here to help you clean up a bit. Is that okay?" Walter considers this, his head tilting like a confused bird. "Clean? Yes. Yes, it's very dirty. I can't remember how to make it clean anymore." His eyes suddenly fill with tears, and he looks down at his hands like they belong to someone else. "I used to know how to do everything. Now I can't. I can't even." He trails off, lost in the vast emptiness of his deteriorating mind, and the three siblings exchange glances that are equal parts grief and guilt. This is what they've reduced him to. This is the man they're stealing from. But they have a job to do, a mission they've committed to, and so they begin. Marjorie takes the upstairs, the bedrooms, the bathroom, the small office where Walter used to pay bills and manage the farm's accounts. Caleb starts in the living room, carefully, methodically searching through drawers and shelves and the spaces behind furniture. Elliot takes the kitchen and dining room, working around Walter, who's returned to his confused vigil in front of the refrigerator. The search feels obscene. Every drawer opened is a violation. Every box rifled through is a betrayal. They find the detritus of a life lived. Old tax returns, faded photographs of family gatherings, letters from their mother written decades ago in her careful cursive. They find Walter's Purple Heart from Vietnam, tarnished and forgotten in a drawer of kitchen towels. They find report cards from their childhoods, every single one saved, even Caleb's failing grades in 9th grade math. And everywhere, scattered like breadcrumbs, they find evidence of the dementia's progression. Notes Walter wrote to himself in increasingly illegible handwriting. Remember to eat breakfast. The year is 2024. Your name is Walter. Your wife is dead. Don't ask where she is. That last one, written in shaking letters on a piece of paper taped to the bathroom mirror, makes Marjorie sob so hard she has to sit on the edge of the bathtub, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. But they find no mysterious paper, no envelope, no document that explains the photo on Caleb's phone, or the figure in the rain, or Walter's moment of terrible clarity. Hours pass. The autumn sun tracks across the sky, throwing long shadows through the dirty windows. Walter moves through the house like a sleepwalker, occasionally muttering to himself, sometimes stopping to watch them with those lost, frightened eyes. Once he asks Caleb, "Are you stealing from me?" And Caleb freezes, mouth open, unable to form words. But then Walter wanders away, the question already forgotten, and Caleb resumes searching with hands that shake so badly he can barely open the cabinet doors. It's Elliot who finds the first real clue, buried in a kitchen drawer beneath expired coupons and rubber bands and the fossilized remains of a grocery list. An envelope, torn open roughly, the edges jagged like something was ripped from it in haste or anger. Inside is a single piece of paper, a receipt, but not for groceries or utilities or any of the mundane expenses of daily life. It's a bank receipt, a deposit slip, $5,000, deposited into an account at Silver Pines Community Bank. The date is recent, just 3 weeks ago, during one of Walter's good days, when the fog lifted enough for him to maybe, possibly, drive himself somewhere and conduct business. But the account number isn't familiar, and the name on the account, the name that makes Elliot's blood run cold and his hands start trembling, isn't Walter Hargrove. It's Elena Martinez. Elliot has never heard that name in his life. He searches his memory frantically, trying to place it. A relative? A friend? A caretaker they don't know about? But there's nothing. The name is completely foreign, completely unexpected, and its existence raises 1,000 terrifying questions. He stands there in the kitchen, holding the receipt like it might explode, his mind racing. $5,000 to a stranger. Why? For what? And more importantly, where did Walter get $5,000 in cash to deposit? The accounts they'd borrowed from were mostly electronic, mostly investments and savings. Had Walter liquidated something they didn't know about? Did he have money hidden that they'd missed? Elliot's heart pounds so hard he can hear it in his ears. He looks up and realizes Walter is standing in the doorway, watching him with an expression that's impossible to read, blank and knowing all at once, empty and full of secrets. "Dad," Elliot says carefully, holding up the receipt. "Who is Elena Martinez?" For a long moment, Walter just stares. His mouth works silently, opening and closing. Then, just when Elliot thinks he won't answer at all, Walter speaks in a voice that's suddenly clear, suddenly coherent, suddenly terrifyingly present. "The lawyer said to only open it when I forget everything." "What lawyer, Dad? What are you talking about?" But Walter's face is already clouding over again, the brief clarity evaporating like morning dew in sunlight. He shakes his head violently, his hands coming up to cover his ears. "I buried it to not hurt you. I buried it to not hurt you." He's chanting now, rocking slightly, retreating into the safe confusion of dementia rather than face whatever memory is trying to surface. "Elliot!" Marjorie's voice rings out from upstairs, sharp with urgency. "Elliot, get up here. Now!" He takes the stairs 2 at a time, the receipt still clutched in his fist. He finds Marjorie in Walter's bedroom, standing frozen in front of the open closet, her face pale as milk. Caleb is there too, having followed the commotion, his eyes wide. "Look," Marjorie whispers, pointing with a shaking hand. On the floor of the closet, partially hidden behind boxes of old shoes, is a small fireproof safe. The kind you buy at Office Depot for $100 to protect important documents from house fires. The lid is open, and it's empty, completely, utterly empty, but scratched into the metal bottom with something sharp, something pointed, are words in Walter's handwriting, crude and desperate. "I know what you did." The three siblings stare at those 5 words, their world tilting sickeningly. Because if the safe is empty, it means whatever was inside is gone. And if Walter scratched that message inside, it means he knew, really knew, about their theft before his mind completely gave way. They're still standing there, frozen in horror, when they hear footsteps on the front porch. Heavy footsteps. Deliberate. The sound of someone who has every right to be there. Then the doorbell rings, its cheerful chime grotesquely out of place, and Walter's voice floats up from downstairs, sudden and panicked. "They came. I knew they would come. I told you they would come." Caleb moves to the window, peers carefully around the curtain, and his face goes absolutely white. "It's Henry Collins," he breathes. "The lawyer. He's here." And through the window, they can see Henry standing on the porch, a black leather briefcase in one hand, his gray hair catching the afternoon light. He's not alone. Standing beside him is a woman none of them have ever seen before, mid-40s, dark hair, wearing a simple dress and holding what looks like a folder. Henry presses the doorbell again, and his voice carries through the door, calm and professional and utterly damning. "Mr. Hargrove? It's Henry Collins. I have the documents you requested. The ones you said to deliver when your children came looking for what isn't theirs." The world seems to stop spinning for a moment. The three siblings stand paralyzed in Walter's bedroom, staring at each other with the kind of raw, animal terror that comes when you realize the trap has already closed and you're the one caught inside it. Marjorie's perfectly manicured hand grips the doorframe, so tightly her knuckles turn bone white. Caleb's breathing has gone shallow and rapid, the sound of a man on the verge of panic. Elliot can feel his own heartbeat hammering in his temples, each pulse a countdown to some inevitable reckoning. Downstairs, they hear Walter shuffling toward the front door, his slippered feet making soft whisking sounds against the hardwood. He's muttering to himself, the words indistinct but urgent, flavored with fear and something else, something that almost sounds like relief. "We can't let him see us," Marjorie hisses, her voice barely above a whisper but sharp as broken glass. "We need to get out of here. Now. Back door." Before what?" Caleb's question comes out louder than intended, edged with hysteria. "Before the lawyer tells Dad what we did. I think he already fucking knows, Marge. Did you see what was scratched in that safe? Did you see?" "Shut up." Elliot snaps, his own fear transmuting into anger because anger is easier than terror. "Both of you, just shut up and let me think." But there's no time to think. The front door is opening. They can hear the creak of old hinges that Walter never got around to oiling, the whoosh of cool autumn air entering the stale house. Henry Collins's voice drifts up the stairs, professionally warm but carrying an undertone of something darker, something knowing. "Walter, good to see you. I hope you remember our conversation from last month. About the documents, about the precautions we discussed." Walter's response is garbled, confused, but they catch fragments. "My children, they came, just like you said, looking for." The three siblings exchange a look that contains entire conversations. The calculations are instant and identical. If they run now, it looks guilty. If they stay and face Henry, they have to maintain the fiction that they're just concerned children checking on their ailing father. But the fireproof safe downstairs screams their guilt. The receipt in Elliot's pocket burns like acid. And somewhere in this house, in Henry's briefcase, or in the hands of that mysterious woman standing on the porch, is evidence of their theft. "We go down," Elliot decides, his voice flat and dead. "We're family visiting Dad. We have every right to be here. We've done nothing wrong." The lie tastes like copper on his tongue, like biting down hard on the inside of his cheek. "Elliot." Marjorie starts, but he's already moving, already descending the stairs with a false confidence he doesn't feel, his legs wooden and uncooperative. Behind him, he hears his siblings following, their footsteps hesitant, condemned prisoners walking toward the gallows. The living room has become a stage, and they're the unwilling actors in a play whose ending they haven't read. Henry Collins stands near the door, his gray suit immaculate despite the Oregon rain that started again, pattering softly against the windows. He's in his 60s, tall and lean, with the kind of face that's seen everything and judges nothing, or judges everything and shows nothing. His briefcase sits on the coffee table, black leather gleaming dully in the weak afternoon light. The woman stands slightly behind him, and up close, Elliot can see she's younger than he first thought, maybe late 30s, with dark eyes that seem to catalog everything, missing nothing. Her dress is simple but elegant, her posture perfect, and there's something about the way she holds herself that suggests someone who's survived things most people only read about in newspapers. Walter has retreated to his usual spot on the sofa, but he's not sitting. He's standing beside it, one hand gripping the armrest for support, his whole body trembling like a tree in a windstorm. And his face, God, his face, is a mask of anguish and confusion, and something that looks terrifyingly like consciousness, like the fog is lifted just enough to let him understand what's happening, but not enough to let him control it. Elliot, Marjorie, Caleb. Henry acknowledges each of them with a slight nod, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp. I'm glad you're all here. It saves me from having to track you down individually. Mr. Collins, Marjorie manages, her voice steady through sheer force of will. She's shifted into business mode, armor up, the vulnerability from moments ago locked away behind corporate polish. This is unexpected. We were just checking on Dad, making sure he's... Making sure he's what? Henry's question is soft, almost gentle, which somehow makes it more terrifying. Comfortable? Cared for? Or making sure he hasn't left anything behind that might complicate your recent financial transactions? The accusation hangs in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes. Even Walter has gone still, his trembling momentarily suspended. Caleb breaks first. He always does. I don't know what you're implying, but we're his children. We have every right to forge his signature on bank transfer documents while he was experiencing a documented episode of severe cognitive impairment. Henry pulls a manila folder from his briefcase, his movements precise and unhurried. To liquidate 70% of his retirement accounts and divide the proceeds among yourselves 3 weeks ago, when your father couldn't remember his own address? Marjorie's face has gone from pale to gray. Elliot feels his knees weaken. Caleb looks like he might vomit. That's not, we didn't forge anything, Marjorie stammers, but the protest sounds hollow even to her own ears. Dad signed those documents himself. He was having a good day. He understood what he was. He understood nothing. The woman speaks for the first time, her voice accented, Spanish, maybe, or Portuguese, but clear and strong. I was there. I saw him sign papers he couldn't read, answer questions he didn't comprehend. I saw 3 children take advantage of a sick old man. Her eyes move from face to face, and there's no mercy in them. I saw everything. Who the hell are you? Caleb demands, his fear translating to aggression the way it always does with him. This is Elena Martinez, Henry says calmly. She's a home health aide who's been checking on your father 3 times a week for the past 2 months. A service I arranged and paid for when it became clear that none of you were going to step up. Elena Martinez, the name from the receipt. The $5,000 deposit. Suddenly pieces start connecting in Elliot's mind, forming a picture he desperately doesn't want to see. Your father, Henry continues, came to me 4 months ago, during one of his increasingly rare moments of clarity. He was terrified, not of the dementia, though that scared him too, but of what would happen when his mind finally went. He said he'd overheard conversations. Discussions about his assets, about what would happen when the time came, about how he wouldn't even know the difference. Henry's voice carries an edge now, sharp enough to cut. He asked me to help him protect himself from his own children. The words land like physical blows. Marjorie actually staggers backward, her hand flying to her mouth. Caleb makes a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Elliot just closes his eyes, because looking at his father's face, the betrayal there, the hurt, even through the confusion, is more than he can bear. So we made a plan, Henry says. A series of precautions. Documents to be opened under specific circumstances. Elena would observe and report. I would monitor the accounts. And if you did exactly what Walter feared you would do, everything would be revealed. Revealed to who? Elliot asks, though he's not sure he wants the answer. To the district attorney's office, for starters. Henry pulls another document from his briefcase. Elder financial abuse is a felony in Oregon, particularly when it involves forgery and exploitation of someone with documented cognitive impairment. The room tilts sickeningly. Marjorie grabs the back of a chair to steady herself. Caleb's face has gone from gray to green. The word felony echoes in Elliot's head like a bell tolling. But Henry isn't finished. However, he says, and that single word makes them all look up with desperate hope, Walter also left instructions for alternative arrangements, if certain conditions were met. What conditions? Elliot's voice comes out as a croak. Henry looks at Walter, who's sunk down onto the sofa now, his hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking. The old man is crying, soft, pitiful sounds that break something fundamental in each of his children. The primary condition, Henry says quietly, was that you had to come back. You had to come looking, because that would mean in some small way you still cared, that you were still capable of feeling something besides greed. The shame that washes over Elliot is so profound, so total, that for a moment he can't breathe. They came back not out of love, but out of fear. Not to help their father, but to cover their own crimes. And somehow, impossibly, Walter knew they would. Plan for it. Use their own guilt as bait. What's in the documents? Marjorie asks, her voice small and broken, nothing like her usual commanding tone. Several things, Henry says. First, a detailed account of the financial abuse, complete with dates, amounts, and Elena's eyewitness testimony of the day you brought those papers for Walter to sign. Papers he couldn't read, couldn't understand, but signed anyway because you told him to. Elena nods, her expression hard. He asked me 3 times what he was signing. You told him it was nothing important, that he was just updating his information. You lied to a sick old man. Caleb makes a choked sound. Tears are streaming down his face now, cutting tracks through 2 days' worth of stubble. Second, Henry continues, there's a revised will. A real one, properly executed during a period when Walter was deemed legally competent by 2 independent physicians. It makes different arrangements regarding his estate. You mean he's cutting us out? Marjorie says flatly. He's leaving everything to someone else. Not exactly. Henry's expression softens slightly. But there are conditions, stipulations, requirements that must be met before any of you see a single dollar. And the third thing? Elliot manages to ask. Henry exchanges a long look with Elena, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then he reaches into his briefcase one more time and pulls out a sealed envelope. It's old, yellowed with age, the kind of paper that hasn't been manufactured in decades. Walter's handwriting on the front is steadier than his current scrawl, written years ago when his hands were still strong. To be opened only when I can no longer remember why I'm angry. Your father left this with me 10 years ago, Henry says. Long before the dementia started. He made me promise to keep it sealed until a very specific moment. What moment? Elliot whispers. Until his children tried to steal from him, got caught, and were forced to face what they'd become. Henry holds out the envelope. He wanted you to know something. Something about your mother. Something about your family. Something he's kept hidden all these years to protect you, or to protect himself. I'm not sure even he knew which anymore. Elliot takes the envelope with hands that shake so badly he nearly drops it. The paper feels fragile, like it might crumble to dust at any moment. He looks at his siblings, sees his own terror reflected in their faces. From his position on the sofa, Walter suddenly looks up. His eyes are clearer than they've been in months, and when he speaks, his voice carries the weight of decades of buried pain. I know what you did, he says, each word crystalline and precise. And now you're going to know what I did. The rain pounds harder against the windows. Somewhere in the house, a pipe drips steadily, marking time like a countdown. And in Elliot's hands, the envelope seems to pulse with secrets that have been breathing in the darkness for far too long, waiting for this exact moment to finally, devastatingly come to light. Elena steps forward, her face softening for the first time. There's one more thing you should know, she says gently. The $5,000 Walter deposited in my account. It wasn't payment for caregiving. It was a donation to a foundation he set up years ago. She pauses, making sure they're all listening. A foundation for families dealing with dementia. He started it after your mother died, named it after her. You would have known about it if any of you had bothered to ask what he did with his days, with his money, with his grief. The guilt, already crushing, becomes absolutely suffocating. Open it, Walter says, pointing at the envelope with a trembling finger. His face is wet with tears, but his voice is steady. Open it and read what I could never say when I could still remember how to love you without hurting. The envelope feels heavier than paper should feel, like it contains not just words, but the accumulated weight of decades of silence. Elliot holds it with both hands, his fingers trembling so badly the yellowed paper rattles softly, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. He looks at his father, at Walter sitting hunched on the sofa with tears streaming down his weathered face, and for the first time in years, maybe in his entire adult life, Elliot sees his father not as an obstacle to inheritance, not as a burden to manage, but as a human being who has suffered in ways Elliot never bothered to understand. "Dad," Elliot says, his voice cracking on the single syllable. "Are you sure you want us to open it?" Walter's command is surprisingly firm, cutting through his son's hesitation like a blade. "I wrote it so you would know, so you would understand why I couldn't." His clarity wavers for a moment, the fog threatening to roll back in, but he shakes his head violently, fighting to maintain his grip on consciousness. "Before I forget again, before I lose it all, open it now." Marjorie has moved closer, drawn by morbid fascination and terror in equal measure. Her makeup is ruined, mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint applied by a shaking hand. She's chewing on her lower lip, an unconscious habit from childhood that resurfaces only in moments of extreme stress. Caleb stands rigid, his hands balled into fists at his sides, every muscle in his body tense like he's preparing to either fight or flee, but can't decide which. Henry Collins and Elena Martinez have positioned themselves near the door, witnesses to this family's unraveling, their expressions professional but not unkind. There's pity in Elena's eyes now, the sort of deep compassion that comes from seeing too much human suffering to remain completely detached. Elliot's thumb slides under the envelope's flap. The seal breaks with a sound that seems impossibly loud in the heavy silence, a soft tearing that feels like the ripping of something vital, something that once torn cannot be repaired. Inside, there are several pages, the paper thin and fragile with age, covered in Walter's handwriting. But this isn't the shaky scrawl they've seen on recent notes. This is the writing of a younger man, steady and controlled, each letter formed with deliberate care. "Read it aloud," Walter says, "so they all hear. So there are no more secrets, no more lies." Elliot clears his throat. Once, twice. The words swim before his eyes, and he has to blink hard to bring them into focus. When he finally speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. "If you're reading this, it means I've lost my mind, and you've found your way back to questions I prayed you'd never have to ask. I'm writing this in the summer of 2014, on the 10th anniversary of your mother's death, because the weight of what I've carried alone has become too much, and because I know that someday, when the dementia takes me, and the doctors say it will, that it's genetic, that I should prepare, someone will need to understand why I made the choices I made." Marjorie's hand flies to her mouth. "He knew," she breathes. 10 years ago, he knew he was going to get sick." Elliot continues, his voice growing stronger out of necessity, because if he stops, he's not sure he'll be able to start again. "Your mother didn't die in a car accident the way we told everyone. That was the story we agreed on, the lie we constructed together in her final days, because the truth was too painful, too complicated, too likely to destroy the family we'd built. The truth is that Sarah, your mother, took her own life." The words land like grenades. Caleb actually stumbles backward, colliding with the wall. Marjorie makes a sound like she's been punched in the stomach. Elliot's vision blurs with tears, but he forces himself to keep reading. "She'd been struggling for years with depression, with demons she never let any of you see because she was so determined to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife. She smiled through every school play and birthday party and holiday dinner, while something inside her was slowly dying. I saw it. God help me, I saw it, and I didn't know how to fix it. I took her to doctors, to therapists, tried medications that made her sleep 20 hours a day or stay awake for 72 hours straight, her eyes wild and frightened. Nothing worked. Or maybe I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I was too proud to admit that my wife was falling apart and I was powerless to stop it." Elliot's voice breaks completely. Tears stream down his face, dripping onto the paper, smudging ink that's already faded with time. Marjorie takes the letter from him with shaking hands, her own eyes so blurred she can barely see the words, but she forces herself to continue. "The day she died, she seemed better, happier. She made breakfast, pancakes, the kind Caleb loved, and she smiled and laughed and seemed more present than she'd been in months. I thought we'd turned a corner. I thought maybe, finally, we were going to be okay. I went to work at the farm, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I came home that afternoon, I found her in our bedroom. She'd taken every pill in the medicine cabinet, and she'd left 3 letters, one for each of you, that I've kept hidden all these years because I couldn't bear for you to read the goodbye of a woman in so much pain she saw death as relief." Marjorie's knees buckle. She sinks into the nearest chair, the letter falling from her hands. Caleb picks it up, his face a mask of devastation, and continues in a voice that sounds like gravel. I should have given you those letters. I know that now. But you were so young. Elliot was 17, Marjorie 15, Caleb only 12. And the letters were so raw, so full of her pain and her apologies and her desperate hope that you would understand why she had to go. I couldn't do it. I couldn't let your last memory of her be that anguish. So I burned the letters. I called it a car accident. I let everyone believe she died instantly, painlessly, that she never saw it coming. I let you grow up thinking your mother was taken from you by random chance, rather than by her own hand. I let you grieve a tragedy instead of wrestling with the guilt and confusion that comes with suicide. The room has become a pressure chamber of emotion. Walter is rocking back and forth now, his hands clasped together so tightly the knuckles have gone white. He's muttering something under his breath, the same words over and over. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Caleb's voice shakes as he reads the final section. But here's what I need you to understand, what I need you to know before I forget it all. Your mother loved you. More than anything. More than her own life, which she proved by ending it when the pain became too great to hide anymore. She didn't leave because of you. She left because of what was broken inside her, something that had nothing to do with you, and everything to do with chemicals and trauma, and things I still don't fully understand. And I made choices, maybe the wrong choices, to protect you from that truth. To let you remember her smile instead of her tears. To preserve the mother you loved instead of introducing you to the stranger she became in her darkest moments. Caleb's voice fails him. He drops the letter, covering his face with his hands, his shoulders heaving with sobs that sound like they're being torn from somewhere deep in his chest. Henry Collins steps forward and picks up the letter, his professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine compassion. There's one more paragraph, he says gently. Would you like me to? Read it, Walter says, his voice surprisingly strong. Read it all. No more hiding. Henry adjusts his reading glasses and continues. I'm telling you this now, in this letter that will only be opened when I can no longer explain it myself, because I fear what will happen when my mind goes. I fear that in my confusion, I might reveal fragments of truth without context, might speak of your mother's death in ways that confuse and hurt you more than the whole story ever could. And I fear that you might hate me for the lies I told, for the letters I burned, for the truth I kept locked away for decades. But more than anything, I fear that I'll die with you never knowing how much I loved you all, how every choice I made, right or wrong, was an attempt to protect you from pain I didn't think you could survive. If you're reading this because you've come looking for money, for inheritance, for things that can be divided and spent, I want you to know something. The only thing worth inheriting from me is the knowledge that love, real love, sometimes means making impossible choices and living with the consequences alone. The signature at the bottom is simple. Your father, Walter Hargrove. July 15th, 2014. The silence that follows is absolute. It's the silence of a world fundamentally changed, of children realizing their entire history has been rewritten, of decades of assumptions crumbling into dust. Marjorie is the first to move, sliding from her chair onto the floor, her expensive clothes pooling around her like she's melting. All this time, she whispers. All this time I thought if she'd just been more careful, if she'd just seen the car coming. Her voice rises to a wail. I've been angry at her for 20 years for leaving us. For dying. And it wasn't an accident. She chose to go. She was sick, Elena says softly, kneeling beside Marjorie. Mentally ill. As sick as if she'd had cancer or heart disease. It wasn't a choice in the way you think. It was an illness that killed her. Caleb has slid down the wall to sit on the floor, his knees drawn up to his chest like a child, trying to make himself smaller. The letters, he says, his voice hollow. She wrote us letters. She said goodbye, and Dad burned them. He looks at Walter with something that's not quite anger and not quite forgiveness, something more complicated, more painful. You burned our goodbye. I thought I was protecting you, Walter says, and his clarity is fracturing now, the fog rolling back in. His words start to slur slightly, confusion creeping into his eyes. I thought, if you didn't know, you wouldn't hurt as much. But I was wrong. I see that now. I was so wrong. Elliot is still standing, frozen in place, the full weight of understanding crushing down on him. That's why you set up the foundation, he says slowly. The Mental Health Foundation. It wasn't just about dementia. It was about Mom. The Sarah Hargrove Foundation for Mental Health Awareness, Henry confirms. He's been running it for 10 years, using a significant portion of his income to fund suicide prevention programs, to provide therapy for families dealing with mental illness, to do for others what he couldn't do for his own wife. And we stole from him, Marjorie says, her voice dead. We stole from a man who spent a decade trying to save other families from what destroyed ours. Walter's face is wet with tears, but he's starting to look confused again, the moment of clarity passing like a storm. Sarah, he calls out suddenly, looking around the room. Sarah, where are you? I need to tell you something. I need to tell you I'm sorry I couldn't. His voice trails off, lost. The three siblings watch their father slip away again, back into the fog, and the loss feels fresh and devastating. For a moment, one precious, terrible moment, they'd had their real father back, the man who loved them enough to lie, to protect, to carry unbearable weight alone. And now he's gone again, retreating into a mind that's betraying him more cruelly than they ever could. Henry opens his briefcase one more time. There's still the matter of the other document, he says quietly. The revised will. The conditions for your inheritance. But Elliot holds up a hand, stopping him. Not now, he says, his voice raw. Please, not now. Henry nods, understanding. I'll come back tomorrow, when you've had time to process this. As the lawyer and Elena prepare to leave, Walter suddenly reaches out and grabs Elliot's hand. His grip is surprisingly strong, desperate. Don't let them burn it, he pleads, and Elliot realizes with a chill that his father is back in that loop, that moment of fear. Don't let them burn the evidence. I won't, Dad, Elliot promises, his voice breaking. I won't let anyone burn anything ever again. Night falls over Silver Pines like a curtain dropping on the first act of a tragedy, and the three siblings find themselves still in their father's house, unable to leave, unable to move forward, suspended in a limbo between the people they thought they were and the people they're being forced to become. They've spent the last 3 hours in near silence, each lost in their own private hell of revelation and regret, while Walter dozes fitfully on the sofa, occasionally muttering names of people long dead or places that no longer exist. Marjorie has aged a decade in a single afternoon. She sits curled in the armchair that used to be their mother's favorite, the one Sarah would sit in every evening with a book she never seemed to finish. Marjorie's designer clothes are rumpled, her face bare of the makeup that usually serves as armor against the world. Without it, she looks vulnerable, almost childlike, and much more like the 15-year-old girl who came home from school one day to find her mother gone forever. Caleb has moved to the kitchen, where he's mechanically making coffee that no one will drink, going through the motions of normalcy because the alternative, sitting still with his thoughts, is unbearable. The cabinet doors open and close. The water runs. The old percolator gurgles and hisses. These mundane sounds form a soundtrack to grief that has no outlet, no resolution. Elliot stands at the window, watching rain streak down the glass, distorting the streetlights outside into abstract smears of yellow and white. He's holding his phone, which has buzzed 3 times with messages from his wife asking where he is, why he isn't home, whether everything is okay. He can't answer because he doesn't know how to explain that everything is definitively not okay, that the foundation of his entire life has just shifted beneath him like sand. It's almost 9 p.m. when headlights sweep across the front of the house, and Henry Collins's car pulls into the driveway. The siblings exchange glances. Why is he back? He said tomorrow. They're not ready for tomorrow. They're not ready for anything. Henry enters without knocking, and this time Elena isn't with him. He's carrying the same black briefcase, but now there's something else, a small digital recorder, the kind journalists use, old-fashioned and somehow ominous in its simplicity. I know I said tomorrow, Henry begins, setting his briefcase on the coffee table with a soft thud that seems to echo in the quiet house. But I received a call from Elena. She was concerned after what happened this afternoon, and frankly, so am I. He looks at each of them in turn, his lawyer's assessment cataloging their damage. I think we need to finish this. All of it. Tonight. We can't take any more, Marjorie says, her voice small and broken. Please. We can't. You can, Henry interrupts, not unkindly. And you must. Because there's more. There's always more with Walter. He planned this meticulously, during those windows of clarity he had before the dementia took hold completely. He knew exactly what he was doing. Walter stirs on the sofa, his eyes opening to confusion that quickly morphs into something sharper when he sees Henry. You came back, he says, and his voice has that quality again, that terrible, heartbreaking lucidity. You brought the tape. I brought the tape, Henry confirms. What tape? Elliot asks, though part of him doesn't want to know, can't bear to know. Henry holds up the recorder. 3 months ago, during what turned out to be Walter's last extended period of clarity, he came to my office and insisted on recording something. He said it was the last piece of the puzzle, the final truth that would explain everything else. He made me promise to play it only under specific circumstances. What circumstances? Caleb has emerged from the kitchen, coffee forgotten, his face pale in the dim light. That you would all be present, that you would have already read the letter about your mother, and that you would be ready, or as ready as anyone can be, to hear what he needed to say about himself. The recorder sits on the coffee table like a small bomb. Henry's finger hovers over the play button, but he doesn't press it yet. Before I play this, he says carefully, you need to understand something. Your father made this recording when he was sound of mind, when he was fully capable of understanding the implications of what he was revealing. 2 physicians evaluated him that day and certified his competency. What you're about to hear is the truth as Walter understands it, and it's going to change everything you think you know about your family. Just play it, Marjorie says, her voice flat with exhaustion. What else can he possibly tell us that could be worse than what we've already learned? Henry's expression suggests she's about to find out. He presses play. For a moment, there's only static, white noise that fills the room like radio interference from another world. Then comes the sound of breathing, heavy and labored, the breathing of a man preparing to confess sins he's carried for decades. When Walter's voice emerges from the speaker, it's stronger than his current voice, clearer, but weighted with immense sorrow. My name is Walter James Hargrove. Today is March 15th, 2025. I am 73 years old, and I am recording this while I still remember why I need to say these things. If you're hearing this, it means my children have discovered what they did, what they took from me. It means Henry has shown them Sarah's letter. And it means they're ready, or they think they're ready, to know the rest. A long pause. The sound of water being poured, a glass being set down. Walter clears his throat. I lied about your mother's death, but that wasn't my first lie. That wasn't even my biggest lie. The biggest lie is one I've been living for 45 years, one that Sarah knew about, one that destroyed her slowly from the inside, and one that I need to tell you before I forget why it matters. Elliot feels his stomach drop. Beside him, Marjorie has gone absolutely rigid. Caleb has sunk into a chair, his face ashen. Walter's recorded voice continues, each word measured and deliberate. Elliot, Marjorie, Caleb, I need to tell you about your mother, about our marriage, about the real reason she couldn't bear to stay in this world anymore. But to tell you that, I have to tell you about what happened in 1979, the year before Elliot was born. I have to tell you about Vietnam, about what I saw there, about what I did there, and about what followed me home. The siblings exchanged confused glances. Their father rarely spoke about Vietnam, would shut down any conversation that veered toward his military service. They knew he'd been there, knew he'd come back with a Purple Heart and nightmares, but the details were locked away in a place he never let them access. I killed people in Vietnam, Walter's voice says, and the words are stark, brutal, without euphemism or justification. That's what soldiers do. We killed people who were trying to kill us, and sometimes we killed people who weren't trying to kill us, who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I came home with blood on my hands that no amount of scrubbing could ever clean. Your mother knew this. She married me anyway, loved me anyway, tried to help me live with what I'd done. Another pause. The sound of Walter struggling with emotion, fighting to maintain control. But there was one thing I never told her. One thing I never told anyone until the dementia started taking my memories, and I became terrified it would be lost forever, that I would die without anyone knowing the truth. Elliot realizes he's holding his breath. They all are. In 1978, a year after I came home, a man showed up at our door. He was Vietnamese, maybe 30 years old, and he spoke broken English. He told me his name was Nguyen Thanh, and he told me that I had killed his brother during the war. He had a photograph, his brother in civilian clothes, smiling, standing in front of a school. He said his brother had been a teacher. He said his brother had been unarmed when I shot him. Marjorie makes a sound like a wounded animal. Caleb's hands are gripping the armrests of his chair, so tightly the wood creaks. I didn't remember, Walter's voice continues, and now it's thick with tears. I'd killed so many people, seen so many faces in rifle sights, that they all blurred together. But this man, Nguyen, he remembered. He'd spent years tracking me down, years finding out where I lived, years planning what he was going to do when he found me. The recording crackles with static for a moment, and they hear Walter take a shaking breath before continuing. He said he was going to kill me, that it was justice, that I deserved to die the way his brother had died, suddenly, violently, senselessly. And I believed him. I could see in his eyes that he meant it, that he'd come all this way for revenge, and I was ready to accept it, ready to pay for what I'd done. Jesus Christ, Caleb whispers. But then your mother came to the door. She was pregnant with Elliot, 7 months pregnant, and when Gwyn saw her, something in him broke. He looked at her belly, at the life growing there, and he started crying. He said he couldn't do it. He said he couldn't make another child grow up without a father the way he'd grown up without a brother. He said the cycle had to end somewhere. Walter's voice is openly weeping now, the words coming between sobs. He gave me the photograph of his brother. He said, "Remember this face. Remember that he had a life, a family, dreams. Remember that what you took can never be given back." Then he left, just walked away, and I never saw him again. The siblings sit in stunned silence as the recording continues. I kept that photograph, hid it. Your mother found it 3 years later, and I had to tell her everything. About the killing, about Nguyen, about the guilt that was eating me alive. She tried to help. God, how she tried. But I was drowning, and I was pulling her down with me. The drinking started. The nightmares got worse. I would wake up screaming, seeing that teacher's face, seeing Nguyen's face, seeing all the faces of all the people I'd killed. A long pause filled with ragged breathing. Your mother's depression didn't start after you were born, Marjorie. It didn't come from nowhere. It started with my confession, with my guilt becoming her burden. She carried my shame for me, tried to help me process it, sacrificed her own mental health trying to save mine. And when she couldn't do it anymore, when the weight became too much, she made the choice she made. Elliot's legs give out. He collapses into the nearest chair, his mind reeling. So when you ask why she killed herself, the answer is more complicated than depression. The answer is that she loved a man who was broken, who broke her in return, who couldn't figure out how to live with what he'd done until it was too late to save her. The recording seems to be ending, but then Walter speaks again, his voice clearer now, almost calm. I'm telling you this because you need to understand that the money you took, the inheritance you stole, that money is blood money. Every dollar I earned, every asset I accumulated, was built on the foundation of a life I took and a wife I destroyed. You thought you were stealing from a confused old man. The truth is, you were stealing from ghosts. From a Vietnamese teacher who never got to grow old. From a woman who loved too much and paid the ultimate price. The static returns, and then Walter's final words. The document Henry has, the revised will, it doesn't cut you out. It does something else entirely. Something your mother and I planned together before she died, during one of her last lucid days. She made me promise to do it, if I ever got the chance. And now, thanks to your greed, I have. The will divides everything equally among the three of you, but with one condition. You have to find where we buried the truth. You have to dig up what we planted in the place where it all began. And when you find it, you'll understand what we want you to do with your inheritance. What we need you to do, to finally put the ghosts to rest. The recording ends with a click that sounds like a door closing forever. The phrase echoes in the silence after the recording ends. The place where it all began. For words that should offer clarity, but instead present a maze of possible meanings. Where did what begin? Their mother's depression? Their father's guilt? The family's slow disintegration? Or something else entirely, something they haven't yet begun to understand? Henry Collins watches them process the recording, his expression unreadable. He's seen people receive devastating news before. It's part of his profession. But there's something different about this, something more profound than the usual revelations of infidelity or hidden debts. This is the kind of truth that rewrites history, that transforms every memory, every assumption, every casual moment of childhood into something freighted with meaning they never perceived. Marjorie is the first to speak, her voice hoarse from crying. Where it all began, she repeats, looking at her brothers. What does that even mean? The house? The farm? Vietnam? He said we buried the truth, Caleb says slowly, his mind working through the fog of shock. He and Mom, they buried something physical. Elliot's mind is racing, sifting through decades of memories, looking for clues in conversations half remembered, in moments that seemed insignificant at the time. The cornfield, he says suddenly, sitting up straight. Behind the barn. Mom used to go there when she was upset. I remember seeing her out there sometimes, just standing in the middle of all that corn, like she was trying to disappear into it. I remember that too, Marjorie says, her eyes widening. I asked Dad about it once, when I was maybe 13. He got this look on his face, this wounded, guilty look, and he said Mom liked the quiet out there, that it was her thinking place. That has to be it, Caleb says, already standing, already moving toward the door. That's where they buried whatever we're supposed to find. Henry holds up a hand, stopping them. It's past 10 o'clock. It's dark. It's been raining all day, and that field is going to be mud. You need to wait until morning, when you can see what you're doing. I can't wait until morning, Elliot says, and there's a wildness in his voice, a desperate need to know, to understand, to finally reach the end of this nightmare of revelation. I can't spend another night not knowing what else they kept from us, what else is waiting to be dug up. We need flashlights, Marjorie says, practical even in crisis. And shovels. The tools are still in the barn, aren't they? They are. The barn where they met just this morning. Was it really only this morning? When their biggest fear was a missing piece of paper. Now they're excavating their entire family history, digging up bones they didn't know were buried. Walter has been silent throughout the playback of his recording, sitting on the sofa with his hands folded in his lap, his expression distant. But as they prepare to leave, he suddenly grabs Elliot's arm with surprising strength. The corn is tall this year, he says, though it's November and the corn was harvested months ago. Don't get lost. Your mother got lost once. I had to go find her. She was crying so hard she couldn't see to find her way back. The image, their mother lost and crying in a cornfield that no longer exists, breaks something in Elliot. He kneels beside his father, taking the old man's weathered hands in his own. We'll be careful, Dad, he promises. We'll find what you and Mom left for us. Walter's eyes clear for just a moment, and he nods. She wanted you to know, he whispers. Even though it hurt. Even though it would change everything. She said children deserve the truth, even when the truth is ugly. They gather supplies like soldiers preparing for battle. 3 flashlights from the kitchen drawer, 2 shovels from the barn, a rake, work gloves that smell like machine oil and earth. Henry insists on coming with them, and Elena, who appears at the door as if summoned, as if she somehow knew this moment was coming, joins them as well. 5 people processing into the darkness behind the house, their flashlight beams cutting through the rain that started again, lighter now, more mist than downpour. The field stretches before them, empty and vast in the darkness. During their childhood, this field was a sea of green and gold, corn stalks rising 8 feet tall, creating natural corridors where they would play hide and seek on summer evenings. Now it's just stubble and mud, the remnants of the harvest rotting slowly back into the soil. The smell is rich and loamy, the scent of things decaying, of organic matter returning to earth. Where do we start? Caleb asks, playing his flashlight across the expanse. This is at least 5 acres. We could dig for days and find nothing. But Marjorie is already walking, her feet carrying her toward a specific spot as if pulled by invisible strings. There, she says, pointing. There's a tree. Do you see it? At the far edge of the field, nearly invisible in the darkness, stands a single oak tree. It's old, massive, its bare branches reaching toward the sky like supplicating arms. It's the only tree in the entire field, left standing when the land was cleared decades ago because Walter's father, the grandfather they barely knew, believed it was bad luck to cut down an oak that old. Mom's tree, Elliot breathes. She loved that tree. She used to take us there for picnics when we were little. They trudged through the mud, their shoes making obscene sucking sounds with each step. The ground is soft from the rain, yielding under their weight. By the time they reach the oak, their clothes are splattered with mud, their hands cold and trembling from more than just the temperature. The oak looms above them, its trunk easily 4 feet in diameter, its roots breaking through the ground in gnarled knots. Elena plays her flashlight around the base, and that's when they see it. A small stone marker, almost completely hidden by dead leaves and mud. It's plain, unmarked, about the size of a dinner plate. Caleb drops to his knees, brushing away the debris with shaking hands. Carved into the stone, barely visible, worn by years of weather, are initials, SH plus WH Sarah Hargrove and Walter Hargrove. And beneath the initials, a date, July 15, 2004, 20 years ago, exactly 10 years before Walter wrote his letter about Sarah's death. They were here together, Marjorie whispers. They came here and they buried something and they marked it. Elliot begins to dig. The shovel bites into the soft earth easily, and within minutes, both he and Caleb are excavating a hole at the base of the stone marker. Mud flies. Rain mixes with sweat on their faces. Their breath comes in ragged gasps that cloud in the cold air. Marjorie holds the flashlight steady, her hands remarkably calm, her face set with determination. 3 feet down, Caleb's shovel hits something solid. A wooden box, maybe 2 feet long and a foot wide, sealed with what looks like wax along the seams to keep out moisture. They work carefully now, clearing the dirt from around it, lifting it with reverence, as if handling something sacred. The box is surprisingly heavy. They carry it back to the surface and set it on the muddy ground. In the combined beams of their flashlights, they can see writing on the lid, carved directly into the wood in Sarah's distinctive handwriting. For our children, when they're ready to understand what love costs. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes. The box sits before them like Pandora's box, and they all understand that once it's opened, there's no closing it again, no returning to ignorance, no pretending they don't know what's inside. It's Henry who finally speaks. Your parents went through a great deal of trouble to preserve whatever is in there. They wanted you to find it. They wanted you to know. Elliot kneels in the mud, his hands hovering over the latch. The metal is rusted but still functional. Together, he says, looking at his siblings. We open it together. Marjorie and Caleb kneel beside him. 6 hands, 3 sets of siblings' hands that carry the same DNA, that learn to tie shoes and hold pencils and drive cars from the same 2 parents, reach for the latch simultaneously. The lid opens with a creak of protesting hinges. Inside, wrapped in layers of plastic to protect against moisture, are several items. The first is a photograph, the photograph Walter mentioned in his recording. A young Vietnamese man, maybe 25 years old, standing in front of a small schoolhouse. He's wearing simple clothes, holding a piece of chalk, smiling at the camera with the kind of open, genuine joy that suggests he loved what he did, loved teaching, loved life. On the back, in faded ink, is written, Nguyen Tan's brother, Nguyen Van. Killed March 7, 1972. Marjorie's sob is immediate and visceral. This is the man their father killed. This is the face that haunted Walter's nightmares, that drove their mother to despair, that set in motion the chain of events leading to this moment. Beneath the photograph are letters, dozens of them, tied together with string. They're addressed to various organizations: the Vietnam War Memorial Fund, the Veterans Administration, mental health clinics, refugee assistance programs. Each letter is in Sarah's handwriting, written on behalf of Walter, pleading for help, for therapy, for someone to understand what her husband was going through. She tried so hard, Elena whispers, reading over their shoulders. She tried everything. There's a journal next, leather-bound and water-stained despite the protective wrapping. Marjorie opens it with trembling hands and finds Sarah's handwriting filling page after page. A chronicle of Walter's struggle, of her own descent into depression, of their joint decision to stay together despite everything, to keep trying, to keep loving each other even as they were both drowning. One entry, dated 6 months before Sarah's death, stops them all cold. Walter and I have decided that if anything happens to either of us, if the pain becomes too much, we want our children to know the truth. Not immediately, they're too young, too innocent. But someday, when they're adults, when they can understand that love isn't always enough, but it's still worth fighting for. We're going to bury everything here, under my tree, the place where Walter proposed to me all those years ago. The place where everything good in our lives began. And somehow, we'll make sure they find it when the time is right. At the very bottom of the box, wrapped in cloth that was once white but has yellowed with age, is an envelope. It's addressed simply, to our 3 beautiful children. Elliot opens it with hands that shake so badly he nearly tears the paper. Inside is a letter in both Sarah's and Walter's handwriting, alternating paragraphs, a conversation between 2 people who loved each other and their children, but couldn't figure out how to survive their own demons. If you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong. It means one or both of us is gone, and you've been left with questions. We want to answer those questions, even though the answers are painful. We are flawed people who made mistakes. We carried burdens we shouldn't have had to carry alone. We let pride and shame and fear prevent us from asking for the help we needed. And our failures, our human, understandable failures, have consequences that echo through generations. But we want you to know something else. We love you. We have always loved you. Every sacrifice we made, every lie we told, every truth we hid, it all came from love. Misguided, perhaps. Insufficient, certainly. But love nonetheless. Take the money we've left you, the inheritance you were so eager to claim, and use it for something that matters. Use it to help other veterans struggling with PTSD. Use it to fund mental health services for families in crisis. Use it to build the world we couldn't figure out how to live in. Use it to save others from the fate we couldn't escape. That's the condition of your inheritance, that you use it to heal the wounds we couldn't heal, to help the people we couldn't help, to be better than we were. And if you can do that, if you can take our failure and transform it into something meaningful, then maybe, just maybe, we didn't fail completely after all. The letter is signed by both of them, and beneath their signatures is one final line. Forgive us. Forgive yourselves. And remember that even broken people can love with their whole hearts. They carry the box back to the house like pallbearers transporting something infinitely precious and infinitely heavy. The rain has stopped, leaving behind a sky scrubbed clean, stars visible for the first time in days, tiny points of light that seem impossibly far away, impossibly indifferent to the human drama unfolding below. Their shoes squelch with each step, leaving muddy footprints that will stain the hardwood floors, but none of them care. Material things, cleanliness, order, the preservation of property, seem absurdly trivial now. Walter is still awake when they return, sitting exactly where they left him, as if he's been frozen in time during their absence. But something has changed in his face. The confusion that usually clouds his features has lifted somewhat, replaced by an expression of profound sadness mixed with something that might be relief. When he sees the wooden box in Elliot's arms, his eyes fill with tears that spill down his weathered cheeks in silent streams. "You found it," he whispers, his voice steady and clear in a way it hasn't been for months. "Sarah said you would. She said when the time came, when you needed to understand, you would find your way to the tree." They set the box on the coffee table, and the five of them, 3 siblings, 1 lawyer, 1 caretaker, arrange themselves around it like supplicants around an altar. Henry has the revised will in his briefcase, but he makes no move to retrieve it yet. Some moments demand to breathe before the business of legality intrudes. "Dad," Marjorie begins, her voice breaking on the single syllable. She's still covered in mud, her expensive clothes ruined, her hair plastered to her head, and she looks more real, more human, more like her mother than she has in years. "Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us grow up thinking Mom died in an accident? Why did you carry all of this alone?" Walter's hands tremble as he reaches for the photograph of Nguyen Van, the teacher he killed 47 years ago. He traces the man's face with one arthritic finger, the gesture tender, reverent. "I was ashamed," he says simply. "Ashamed of what I did in the war. Ashamed that I couldn't save your mother from the depression my guilt caused. Ashamed that I was weak when I should have been strong." "You weren't weak," Caleb says, and there's a fierceness in his voice that surprises everyone, including himself. "You were human. You were dealing with trauma and PTSD before we even had proper names for those things. You were trying to survive." "I survived," Walter agrees, his voice hollow. "But your mother didn't. And that's the cost I'll carry until the dementia takes even that memory away." He looks at each of his children in turn. "I wanted to protect you from that cost, from knowing that love sometimes isn't enough. That good people can do terrible things and spend the rest of their lives trying to atone. That mental illness doesn't care how much you're loved or how hard you fight." Elliot pulls out Sarah's journal, opening to a random page. His mother's handwriting, so familiar from birthday cards and permission slips and grocery lists, fills the lined paper with words he never imagined she'd written. March 3rd, 1998. Walter woke up screaming again. 3 times this week. He dreams he's back in the jungle, back in that moment when he pulled the trigger, back when he could have chosen differently but didn't. I hold him afterward, feel his body shake with sobs, and I absorb his pain like a sponge absorbs water. But I'm saturated now. I'm so full of his anguish, his guilt, his self-hatred, that there's no room left for myself. I'm disappearing inside his trauma, and I don't know how to stop it. Marjorie takes the journal, her hands gentle with the artifact of her mother's suffering. She flips through pages, reading passages that chronicle the slow erosion of a woman's mental health, the gradual surrender to despair. June 12, 1999. I made an appointment with a therapist today. Then I canceled it. How can I talk about my problems when Walter's problems are so much bigger? How can I complain about feeling sad when he's haunted by the face of a man he killed? My pain feels selfish, insignificant. So I smile at my children and I cook dinner and I pretend that everything is fine, even though I'm drowning. "She was drowning because of me," Walter says, and his voice cracks completely. "Every day she stayed, every smile she forced, every time she told you kids that everything was okay. It was a lie she told to protect you from what I'd turned her into." "No," Elena says firmly, and everyone turns to look at her. She's been quiet until now, observing, bearing witness, but there's authority in her voice now. the authority of someone who's seen this story play out in countless variations. No, Mr. Hargrove, your wife made her own choices. Mental illness is not a simple cause and effect. Yes, your trauma affected her. Yes, she carried burdens she shouldn't have had to carry. But depression is a disease. It's chemical, biological, complex. You didn't give her depression any more than you gave her cancer. You were both sick in different ways, and neither of you had the tools or support you needed. Walter stares at her, and something in his face shifts. Not quite acceptance, but perhaps the first glimmer of a path toward it. Henry clears his throat gently. I think it's time, he says, opening his briefcase and withdrawing the revised will. Time to discuss what Walter and Sarah planned for your inheritance. The document is thick, dozens of pages of legal language, but Henry turns to the relevant section and begins to read. The estate of Walter James Hargrove, consisting of property valued at approximately $1.2 million, shall be divided equally among his 3 children, Elliot James Hargrove, Marjorie Ann Hargrove, and Caleb Michael Hargrove, contingent upon the following conditions being met within 1 year of Walter's death or incapacitation. First, that the children establish and fund a mental health foundation in Sarah Hargrove's name, with a minimum initial contribution of $400,000, dedicated to providing therapy and support services for veterans and their families struggling with PTSD and depression. Second, that the children make a substantial donation to refugee assistance programs supporting Vietnamese immigrants and their families, as a gesture of atonement for the harm caused during the Vietnam War. Third, that the children commit to learning about and publicly acknowledging their family's history, the good and the bad, the love and the trauma, so that others might learn from their story. Henry pauses, looking up at them. If these conditions are not met, the entire estate will be donated to organizations chosen by Walter and Sarah, and you will receive nothing. The siblings sit in stunned silence. The money they stole, the money they thought they deserved simply by virtue of being his children, comes with strings attached. No, not strings. Responsibilities. Obligations to do something meaningful with their inheritance rather than simply spending it on themselves. We took the money already, Caleb says quietly. We already spent some of it. I paid off my gambling debts. Marjorie bought a new car. Elliot put a down payment on a vacation home. How do we? You return it, Henry says simply. You return what you took illegally, and when your father passes or is legally declared incompetent, you receive your inheritance properly, if you agree to the conditions. Marjorie laughs, but it's not a happy sound. So we're right back where we started. Except now we know we're thieves and failures and the children of broken people who tried their best and failed anyway. No, Walter says, and his voice is surprisingly strong. Now you know you're human. Just human. Flawed and capable of mistakes, and also capable of doing better. That's all I ever was. That's all your mother was. And that's all you are. He stands with effort, his body frail but his presence somehow commanding. He crosses to where the photograph of Nguyen Van lies on the table, and picks it up with reverent care. This man, he says, holding the photo so they can all see, had a life. Had dreams. Probably wanted to get married, have children, grow old. I took all of that from him in a moment of fear and confusion and the horrible mathematics of war. I can't give it back. I can't undo what I did. But I can acknowledge it. I can remember him. I can make sure his death wasn't completely meaningless by using the guilt it caused to try to help others. He sets the photograph down and turns to his children. That's what I'm asking you to do. Take the inheritance, take the money that I earned through decades of work, that I saved and invested and grew, and use it to help people. Use it to fund therapy for veterans who are where I was. Use it to support families dealing with mental illness. Use it to help refugees build new lives in a country that once saw them as enemies. And if we don't? Elliot asks, not challenging but genuinely curious. If we take the money and run, if we ignore the conditions, then you'll have money, Walter says simply. And you'll have proved that everything your mother and I feared about what we'd become was true. That in trying to protect you from pain, we raised children who only understand taking, not giving. Who only understand entitlement, not responsibility. The accusation hangs in the air, and none of them can deny it. Because it's true. They did feel entitled. They did take without thinking about the consequences. They did reduce their father to a source of money, rather than seeing him as a human being who'd suffered and survived and tried to be better than his worst moment. Marjorie is crying again, but these tears are different, cleaner somehow, less about self-pity and more about genuine remorse. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispers, using a name she hasn't called him since she was 10 years old. "I'm so sorry. We should have been here. We should have helped you. We should have asked about Mom, about the foundation, about what you needed instead of what we wanted." Caleb nods, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Elliot moves to his father's side, kneeling so he can look up into Walter's face. "We'll do it," he says firmly. "We'll meet the conditions. We'll establish the foundation, make the donations, tell the story. Not because we have to for the money, but because it's right. Because it's what Mom would have wanted. Because it's what you deserve from us." Walter's face crumples with emotion. He reaches out with shaking hands and cups Elliot's face the way he used to when Elliot was a child. "That's all I ever wanted," he whispers. "For you to understand. For you to care. For you to be better than I was." "We're not better than you," Elliot says. "But we can try to be. We can learn from your mistakes instead of repeating them." Henry produces one more document, a simple agreement that the siblings will return the money they took and will commit to meeting the conditions of the will. They sign it one by one, their signatures shaky but determined, each stroke of the pen a promise, a commitment, a choice to be different than they were just 48 hours ago. As dawn begins to break outside, painting the Oregon sky in shades of pink and gold, the five of them sit together in Walter's living room. The old man's clarity is fading again, his eyes starting to cloud with confusion, but before he slips away entirely, he says one more thing. "Love isn't about being perfect. It's about trying, failing, and trying again anyway. Your mother understood that. I hope you will too." Then he's gone again, retreating into the fog, leaving behind 3 children who finally understand what inheritance really means. Not money or property, but the responsibility to carry forward the love, the lessons, and the legacy of imperfect people who did their best with the broken pieces they were given. Outside, the sun rises on a new day, and on 3 people who are finally ready to become the children their parents deserved. Not perfect, not unblemished, but willing to try. Willing to honor the memory of broken love by building something stronger from its fragments. That's the real inheritance. That's what was buried under the oak tree all along. The end. Sometimes the inheritance we fight hardest to claim is the one that costs us the most to keep. 3 siblings thought they were stealing money from a man who wouldn't remember, but what they actually stole was time. Time they could have spent loving their father while he still knew who they were. Time they could have spent asking questions instead of counting dollars. Time they could have used to understand that the most valuable thing he had to give them wasn't in any bank account. Their parents carried unimaginable pain in silence, made impossible choices born from love and trauma, and left behind not just money, but a lesson that would echo through generations. That true inheritance isn't what we take, but what we choose to do with what we've been given. Walter and Sarah Hargrove weren't perfect people. They were broken, flawed, haunted by ghosts they couldn't outrun. But they loved their children enough to plan for a moment of reckoning, to force them to see what greed had turned them into, and to offer them one final chance at redemption. So ask yourself this: if you discovered your parents had hidden a devastating truth to protect you, would you be grateful for the lie or angry about the deception? If you found yourself in a position to take what you believed you deserved from someone who couldn't stop you, would you have the strength to walk away? And if you were given a second chance to honor the memory of imperfect people who loved you with everything they had, would you be brave enough to transform their failure into something meaningful? These aren't easy questions, and this story doesn't offer easy answers. It offers something more valuable, a mirror that reflects the uncomfortable truth about what we're all capable of when we stop seeing the people we love as human beings and start seeing them as obstacles to what we want. The Hargrove children learned that lesson in the most painful way possible, but they learned it in time to make a different choice, to become different people, to turn inheritance into legacy. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own family, your own choices, your own capacity for both cruelty and redemption, then please follow this channel for more stories that will make you feel deeply and think differently. Leave a like if you believe that even broken people deserve compassion, and share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose love over greed, understanding over judgment, and healing over hiding. Because the best inheritance we can leave isn't money or property. It's the courage to face hard truths and the wisdom to learn from them. Thank you for listening to this story. May it stay with you long after the final words have faded.